So my name is Antonia. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Clapper and have been working here since April of last year and loving every second. So today I'm joined by three wonderful Clapper volunteers. So that's Mel, Nadine and Bronwyn. And we've got Ashley from Kidscape, and then we've got Tim and Jen, who are clinical psychologists from the Evelina Cleft service. So I think, first of all, if we just go around and if you're happy to just provide a brief little introduction to yourselves. Bronwyn, can we start with you?
Yes, so my name's Bronwyn. I was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate, and I've been volunteering for Clapper for about 2.5 years now. Before that, I sort of benefited from the services myself. When I was younger, I went to like some residential weekends and things, and I also did a bit of fundraising for them. And yeah, like I said, now I'm a volunteer.
And Mel, are you happy to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mel. I have two teenage daughters, one with a cleft and a boy born without a cleft. I was born with a cleft lip and palate myself. And I've now been volunteering for Clapper for 13 years as a parent supporter.
Lovely, thank you. Nadine?
Hi, I'm Nadine, parent to Amelia, born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. Been involved with Clapper for around 13 years as a parent support contact, fundraiser, and also sat on the Patient Voices team at Birmingham Children's Hospital.
Thank you. Tim?
Hiya, I'm Tim. I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist at the Evelina Cleft service. Joined fairly recently, and yeah, really enjoying it.
Thanks, Tim. And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm also a clinical psychologist in the Evelina London Cleft team. I've been in the team on and off for about 6 years.
That's fantastic, thank you. And Ashley?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Ashley. I've been working at Kidscape for 5 years. Kidscape is a bullying prevention charity, and why I believe we're so special is because we offer that practical support, those practical tools to children and families going through a bullying situation. And it's great to be here this evening.
Thanks so much, Ashley, and thank you to everybody. We're really pleased that you could all join us with such a wealth of experience and knowledge between everybody here. So we've had a selection of pre-submitted questions, but if anybody watching has any questions or would like to add a comment, then please do pop it in the comments in the chat feature of the video, and we'll do our best to answer this as we go along. So over to Bronwyn.
Yeah, so before we start with the questions, we just wanted to share with you a story from an amazing 13-year-old who we're going to call Jane for confidentiality reasons. And she was born with a cleft and she was getting bullied, and this is just how she dealt with it. So Jane was born with a cleft and sadly got bullied about this. She booked to come along to one of Clapper's residential weekends, but was very anxious about it. So before she went on the weekend, she actually got to meet some of her fellow roommates over Zoom. And that helped her feel a lot more excited about it and less anxious about going. At the residential weekend, she made some great friends and stayed in touch with some of the girls. She mentions that speaking with one of the volunteers also really helped her with the issues she was having around bullying at school. And Jane now really wants to go on another weekend away, and she talks about how meeting other people with a cleft was really beneficial because she was able to share stories with them and experiences around their challenges with bullying, and it's given her the confidence to stand up for herself and actually challenge others when they've been cruel. Since the residential weekend, Jane has also given a talk at her school about cleft, and was really proud of herself for being able to do this. Jane's mum says the change in her confidence has been great to see. She still has some issues with bullying at school, but is now telling staff when it happens and challenging the children she has issues with. And we're so pleased to hear that Jane has grown in confidence and feels that she's got the right tools to challenge those who've said hurtful things, and just well done to this fantastic young person. Right, so on with the questions then. Mel, do you want to start off?
Yeah, so first question is, what are the different types of bullying?
Yeah, I can take that question. So in England we have 4 different types of bullying. We have verbal, we have physical, we have emotional, and probably the most recent to that list is cyberbullying or online bullying.
Okay, and why do people bully in the first place?
Yeah, good question. Huge question. It can be a number of reasons. I think ultimately where Kidscapes can support is that we provide support for both, and you'll hear me talk about bullying behavior, and you'll hear me talk about using the term target, and also we try to avoid using the term perpetrator because they're quite sort of loaded words. And also that word perpetrator, it doesn't always allow for an avenue to understand that bullying is behaviour, and that we can actually work with those children displaying bullying behaviour, but also those children being targeted themselves. So it can be a number of things. It can be that it feels powerful when a certain person is in control, or it could be to prove something to an individual, to a group, or to those people around them. It can be that they're really struggling to regulate or to kind of deal with and manage emotion, the thoughts and feelings. It could be when we look at the dynamic even closer, that individual or that group are involved in a bullying situation themselves, as in they're being targeted by others as well. There could be things happening within the home, or jealousy is a factor. So there's lots and lots of reasons why a young person might just be displaying bullying behaviour. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Ashley. I think Nadine is going to ask another question.
Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. I do that all the time. We've been asked some questions by fellow parents. So the first one is, I'm pregnant and have had a diagnosis of a cleft lip, possible palate for my baby. I'm worried about how to tell people about my child's facial difference, and if members of the public may say hurtful things about my baby and will look different to normal babies. Have you got any tips on how to tell people about their cleft and how to respond to hurtful comments? This is a toughie. I actually experienced this myself. I remember my daughter was probably only a couple of weeks old, went to a local garden centre with my mum, and as you do, you take your little toddler in, or a little baby in the pushchair, and the older generation are always those that come, oh, you've got a baby, let's have a look. And the look of abject horror and fear on some people's faces, it just makes your heart sink. But I had one lady that came up and she looked at her and she went, she's beautiful. She's got a cleft. Everything will be fine. And I think it's that sort of reaction that helps you realise that no matter what you're going through as a family, there are people that are there that are going to support you. My nieces at the time were 5 and 7, so we explained that when the baby arrived, she was going to look slightly different. We couldn't tell them completely, but it's showing them pictures, going on the Clapper website, making people aware that, you know, yes, there will be physical differences, but she's going to be a baby. She loves her cuddles and kisses, and it's just really making people aware of those sort of those experiences that they're going to feel as well, and not to be afraid to ask questions. Really, I think that's from my point of view. Mel, I'm not sure how you felt when you were approached by people.
I was actually quite well prepared by the cleft nerve specialist, and she did role plays with me when I was pregnant. And she asked me, how would you deal with someone coming up to you and asking you what is wrong, you know, with the baby? And so I was fairly well prepared. So I had kind of rehearsed, you know, a scenario in my head. But mostly I had some only positive comments. I have to say, mostly people are saying they're so cute. Mostly just younger children coming past the pushchair and looking, doing a double take, and then asking their parent I was, but mostly, yeah, I've not had anything that, upsetting really. But yeah, again, the specialist nurse really helped me with that, because she really prepared me for the eventuality. So I felt prepared. So yeah.
Definitely. I think you speak to your cleft nurses. They will give you all the emotional support that they possibly can, and ask Clapper for referrals to parents like myself or Mel. We can explain our feelings and our emotions that we've gone through as a real life experience, and I think that will help you sort of deal with anything that you may have to encounter as a new parent, really. Next question we've got: I think my child is being bullied at school. They won't talk to me about it. What do you think I can do to help? Ashley, any advice from yourself? I've got my experiences of school and children, but your take would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think the first question is kind of what led you to kind of sort of think that something might go on. What were those indicators, or what were those sort of telltale signs? I think it's always a struggle when you feel that your young person wants to talk to you and they're just not. So our advice would be try and create those calm spaces. Bedtime is a really good one. Going for a walk or for a drive where you're taking away that sort of element of eye contact as well, where you're side by side and maybe the distraction is with what's going on around you, and asking those questions, and then looking out for what sort of telltale signs of body language, and making sure you're really listening. If your young person doesn't open up in that moment, then keep creating those opportunities until they are ready to talk about something. And there's going to be lots of reasons why they won't. Our young people, they are so protective of us as well, with what we're going through, with stresses of work, and we might have other siblings as well. So there is that hurdle there where they won't want to put this pressure on you as well. But I think really it's to reassure. If they do open up, then start recording everything, and make sure you're putting them in control as well. What do they need and what do they want? And we go at their pace. If we need to speak to the school, then we ask for help. And I think as a parent and carer, have that protective circle around you as well. It's a very daunting, overwhelming, and sometimes lonely feeling when your young person is going through a bullying situation. So have friends, have family that you can kind of offload and speak to. So you've got that protective circle around you as well. That would be my advice.
Right. We've had a question online. Basically, my son wants to know about his cleft. It's a lot to take on board, and he's possibly losing front teeth due to his cleft. How do we stop bullying? His speech is already difficult to understand, and people are sort of asking for advice on that situation. Is there anything you sort of can add in, Tim or Jen, from your perspective as psychologists of children you've met throughout their treatments?
Yeah, so I guess I would be interested to know maybe what age the child is, but I'm assuming that they're quite young. It's a difficult one with speech, because the thing that we always say as psychologists is to try and sort of practice being confident in naming what your cleft is, and that is done through a lot of modeling through parents and having those open conversations from quite an early stage. And obviously if you are finding it hard for yourself to be understood, then that can be a really hard thing to then explain to other people. However, I would always say that it's still really helpful for parents to be very open and honest from from an early age about the difference and why they're different, so that they have the knowledge and the understanding that's obviously appropriate to their age and stage of learning. Using simple, honest language and being, just opening those conversations up if needed, so that they know and that they witness and have that model to them that it's really okay to talk about it, and that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to have that difference, and it's something that they can own for themselves and have control over. It's very difficult to stop bullying, I think. I don't know if you that's the one thing, I guess, as families, that they can't necessarily control how other people are going to react. Like you say, Nadine, and Mel, you can prepare, so you can obviously control what you can do and how you can prepare for those situations, but unfortunately you can't necessarily stop it from happening. And that can be really scary as a parent, because you ultimately can want to protect them, and you have that instinct to protect and always shelter them from those things. But what you can do is equip them with those skills of knowing about their difference and what it is, and modeling from them in front of them as much as you can, that it's really okay to talk about it, and naming what it is, and they were born with a cleft and that's why they sound a bit different, for example. Just something really simple like that. Tell teachers the same thing, so that if others, for example, are struggling to understand them, maybe the teacher can step in and explain, and maybe help the other children to understand and educate them about why their speech is different, and perhaps help them to be a little bit more patient with listening, and kind of maybe understanding what they are saying. Yeah, I don't know if Tim, you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I was going to say a lot of kind of similar things, in that keeping the conversation at home going and being able to talk about, I guess, cleft being part of their story, and also the fact that there's going to be so much else about their story as well, and the kind of building that strengths focused approach at home, where we're constantly talking about the things they're doing well. And I think it's really easy for us to kind of fear that worst case scenario in terms of bullying when there is difference, and I think we do see it. Unfortunately, it does happen, but it also, children with cleft have got so many strengths. And actually, I was working with someone that we saw in a clinic the other day, and they were talking about how their speech was slightly more difficult to understand, but they built up a really good way of communicating with their friends, and their friends understood what they said, and were able to kind of have that patience as well, and advocate for their friend as in difficult situations. So I think keep reminding them of their whole story, and giving it sort of is really empowering when they've got something to say. And then something Mel said earlier about kind of the role playing, just kind of, if you can practice some of those things, it really can, because it can be quite off-putting kind of if a comment comes out of the blue, but if you've got a practice thing that you can say, it can make us feel much more confident in kind of dealing with those challenges. And a lot of the time the first question is more about curiosity than about insulting, but it doesn't feel like that necessarily at the start. So having that thing you can say back is really important.
Yeah, I agree. From our perspective, we taught Amelia from a very early age. Anybody asked why she looks slightly different, and her response was, "It's my lip palette." She couldn't say cleft lip and palate, but it came out, "Oh, it's my lip palette," and that was her response. And from sort of nursery sort of age, her friends just accepted it. We didn't find that she had an issue until really she went from nursery to primary school, where it was a whole new set of people, so children. And again, when she went from key stage 1 through to key stage 2, because it's another jump to another phase. But yeah, keep telling your kids, don't be afraid to tell people about your cleft. I think that's your
Yeah.
key.
Another time, isn't it? It's about curiosity and just not knowing what it is, and which makes them
Exactly.
wondering, and so explaining matter of fact way, which my daughter did. Both my daughters did, actually, being quite assertive and say, "Well, I was born with a gap; it was fixed. There you go. There's not much else I can tell you." And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just being quite matter of factly about it and just say, "That's just how I am." So that's the deal.
Yeah.
It does help.
Our next question is, my child is getting bullied. I don't feel the school is doing enough to support them. Is there anything else we can do, or can you recommend anything we can ask the school to do for them? Any of you guys got sort of any advice for this parent? I know we had this when my daughter joined high school, so year 8. It was basically our only option was to contact the head of her year, explain the situation, and thankfully I think we were maybe in the minority of some schools, but her school dealt with it very quickly, got the children involved into the office. First off, they asked Amelia to come into the office and explain the situation for her point of view. Once she'd given her side of the confrontation and the issues that they were going through, then they brought in the other children individually, asked for them, and it probably took just over a week or so for the whole investigation to happen. But eventually the children involved were actually made to stand up in front of Amelia and actually physically apologise to her and say, "I'm sorry, didn't mean to offend you, didn't mean to upset you." Just my advice is keep on at the school until they actually listen to you and take some action. But that I can only explain from our point of view. I don't know if anybody else has got any sort of advice other than that, really.
I agree, Nadine, is to really keep the communication line open with the teachers and the leaders, the school leaders. And with my second daughter, she had a cleft palate. The first only had a cleft lip. And so after her operation, she still had a bit of a gap inside, which meant that food was coming down her nose. Unfortunately, at lunchtime, it would be quite obvious. And there's a lot of pointing, and comments, kind of nasty comments. And she came home from school crying, which was not nice to see. I was bullied myself. So obviously went straight through the heart. And I talked to the teacher, explained everything, and the teacher actually spoke to the class. And the school was, they had an assembly about bullying, actually, that kind of triggered the school to, not specifically about cleft. Obviously, we didn't want to point the spotlight at my daughter, but about bullying in general. And that really, really helped. And the children understood what was happening. And that really helped, I think. My daughter didn't have to individually explain to all the children. So all the children from her class knew why that was happening. So that really, really helped. So that really helped. The school was really good about that. In my case, anyway.
I was gonna. Oh, sorry, Ashley. I was just gonna say, I don't know how, when it can feel like if a school's not doing enough, or you've maybe raised something and it's felt like nothing's moved on. I guess one thing that can be helpful is just keeping a record, and sort of don't feel too disheartened from that first pushback. I guess it can be quite tiring to do this, but to kind of continue to keep a record so you can show them actually this is repeated, or this having a really significant effect. And because I know, like, when going to those meetings or on the phone to a school when they're busy, when it's the end of the day, or if it's at the end of school, it can be difficult to remember all the things. It can feel like quite a rush talk sometimes. So having those things written down so you've got them, so you can kind of present them, because I think that will help the teachers kind of identify it as well and take it as seriously as possible. And then I think they've got the tools as well to hopefully act on that and put in the best policies. Sorry, Ashley.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is just, yeah, make sure everything's in writing. All of those phone conversations or those conversations outside the classroom. It might be you being that proactive parent and carer by sending a summary of that conversation that took place at the gate or over the telephone, just so you've got that. Yeah, you've got that chronology, exactly what was just being said then. And also look at policies as well. They should all be visible on school websites. So looking at kind of sort of ethos and values of that school, and making sure that they are doing what they said they should be doing. And I think when you are preparing for that first meeting as well, have someone with you. If partner isn't able to be there, or having a friend or another family member in there, just taking notes, because you'll go into that meeting, and these meetings are always very emotive, and they'll ask you your name, and we can't remember our name in those situations sometimes. So have someone with you, because you are allowed, and then agree a time scale as well. So it could be that we're going to meet again in a week's time. Maybe sort of look at resolution in sort of phases. So in this time we want maybe sort of a change of classroom, or if that's what's suggested by the school, and just be very clear with the facts, and that's what's going to support you with having that chronology, having your young person's words there, so sort of capturing what's going on through them. And I can share some bullying logs that we have on the Kidscape website, where we also have sort of emotion mats as well, where for our neurodiverse children, they want to be able to, or those who are struggling to kind of really articulate what's happening, there's other sort of suggestive logs that we can share, which are going to make it easier to kind of sort of disclose what's happening.
That'd be really useful. Amelia used to come home with notes written all across her arm and down her hand. So, if they know that there's something they can use. We're having some really sort of good feedback there, and it's, thank you everybody for watching it and inputting your comments. Unfortunately, there's some really sad ones. My son was bullied all through senior school, and even the teachers were aware of it, but he felt very isolated. Another one, a 9-year-old son broke down in tears tonight. He's been trying to make friends at judo for over a year, and nobody will partner with him. Being called names. It's so hard when you've got your children that are coming home distraught day after day. I mean, even Amelia, she recently, her best friend at school has moved out of the area, so she's now actually stopped eating school dinners because she feels so self-conscious. So as she's sat in a dining room or somewhere that she doesn't feel comfortable with people, she's like this. So now it's a case of she'll take a snack bar and a bottle of water, and she'll eat something when she comes home from school. But please, any parent, please try and encourage your children to talk to their teachers, their classmates, even their best friends, yourselves. If they don't feel comfortable to you, just try and get them to try talking to somebody, and then you can start that process of trying to help them and get over this bullying. I'm going to hand over to Bronwyn now.
Yeah, so we've had some questions from some children and young people as well. The first one is, what can I do if I'm being bullied over social media?
Shall I go for it?
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, it is it is something that we deal with regularly at the charity, and I know that young people, it's the sort of the most common reason why children under the age of 11 contact Childline, which is sort of online bullying. There's actually a lot more powers that we have online than we do in the real world, so we can sort of report and mute and block, and it's about being empowered to take control and to do those things. And if we don't want to stop using social media and all those kind of sort of fun elements that it brings, so on certain sort of social media platforms we can limit who's allowed to comment on our videos. We can limit that to our 5 best friends, so we can say those people that are going to be really positive, I'm going to allow them to comment on these videos and these photos, and only them as well. Or we can turn comments off. So it's really about creating that kind of sort of that kind environment that you want. And as a young person, you have the ability to do that. And with sort of parent and care encouragement, we can look at settings and actually make that environment a safer place for that young person. That's my answer.
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice I was actually given about like being on social media and things like that was just trying to create it like a positive space, so you can follow certain people, unfollow anyone anytime that's going to sort of give you any kind of like mean comments, or just not have like a positive feed. You know, it's really encouraging to try and get like follow those people who are going to make you feel good and things like that, and you like have control over that at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, and then what will happen is all of those sort of those algorithms will learn, and what you've suddenly done is you've created all of those other sort of advertisements or kind of other sort of channels that were going to be kind of appearing on your blog are going to be just as positive and just as enriching. So it's about staying in control.
Yeah, definitely. So another question we've had is, I worry that standing up to a bully will make things worse. What do you think I should say or do when confronting them?
Maybe Tim and I can comment on this. So we were actually talking about this a bit early, this question, because I think this is one of the harder ones. And from the point of view of it, I think it is a really difficult situation, and it's a difficult situation to advise on. So, I mean, when Tim and I were talking about it, we were thinking about what advice would we give. I mean, I think again, the idea of kind of trying to have a bit of a script in your mind, or kind of role play what you're going to say a little bit. It can sound a bit funny to people, but actually if you practice that at home with people that you trust, or even just in front of the mirror, or with your mates that you do trust, that can help, and have a few different scenarios, because you don't obviously know how they're going to respond exactly. So almost like a bit of a plan A and a bit of a plan B. And we were also thinking about, you know, having someone with you if you can, like having, you know, your mates around you, having your tribe, having the people that you do get on with as much as possible to be around, to give you that support. And I think there is something about, you know, practicing not only what you're going to say, but how you're going to say it. And we talk with young people quite a lot about this idea of trying to act assertively, or kind of present yourself in an assertive way, which is, again, can be quite a challenging thing to do. But practicing that kind of more assertive body language can be really helpful. And again, you can do that in front of the mirror at home in your own time, but thinking about making eye contact, standing up straight, you know, putting your shoulders back, taking a deep breath, all of those sort of things, I think can actually be really helpful in those situations, because as we all know, that communication of body language is so powerful. Rather than what we say, it's kind of how we say it, and the eye contact, and the, you know, quite kind of clear words, and saying it, you know, as loudly, not shouting, but, you know, saying it clearly so that people can hear you. So I think that's sort of what I would say. Is Tim, anything would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that assertive communication is really key, because I guess assertive is kind of in the middle of, so you've got kind of passive communication on one side, where when we're being really passive, what happens there is we often sacrifice our own rights, and that's not okay. If we're feeling passive, that means that people can often, you know, as bullying can take advantage of us. They can be mean to us, and we feel like we've got no kind of control over that. And at the other end of the spectrum, which is often what bullying is where we're kind of at that aggressive end of the spectrum. And I think getting that sort of balance in the middle of being assertive, of standing up for yourself, but not being aggressive is it's a skill. I don't think anyone's actually born assertive. So I think that's why the practicing can be really, really important. And it might feel strange, it might feel uncomfortable if we've been used to being in that sort of more passive part of that relationship. But I think when the worry is about standing up to bullies, I think there's some really reasonable worries that might come up. And I think firstly, making sure we're doing it in a safe way is important. I think if the bullying feels like it's going to be dangerous, then that's not the place to do it. But if it feels like a safe place, by standing up and having a thing to say to the bully, that changes the dynamic a little bit. And often I think what you find with relationships like that, where there's been this kind of power indifference, when one person changes the way that they might act or behave, the whole dynamic switches a little bit. And bullies sometimes they kind of they're feeding off the passivity there, because it feels like there's no consequence to what they're doing. So actually having something to say that you've practiced, that you can feel strong with, doesn't have to be the best thing. It can just be that response. Sometimes people might even just ask them to repeat themselves. That's sometimes a technique that people use. And people that have said something quite mean, it's quite hard for them to say it again, because they're being asked to think about it, especially if it's kind of in a situation where they've not been asked to do that before. So I think having that practice, having a couple of things, as Jen said, and just practicing at home, kind of being that assertive self, because it might not be what we normally like. The body language, I heard someone say a good way of practicing the body language is kind of using doorways as a kind of almost like a reminder to readjust your body language, because we go through so many doorways a day, we don't realize it, but it can be really hard to remember to hold ourselves in a certain way. We might go back to a kind of a lower way, or a way that we might feel smaller. But if every time you walk through a doorway, kind of just check your posture, check that you're sort of rising up, maybe it's about smiling, and then that pattern, the more we practice, the more it then just becomes natural. And I think that can change the dynamic in a relationship where there is bullying.
Yeah, and I would love to just add that for parents and carers listening, is that's exactly what Kidscape do. For the last 20 years, we put on what we call our ZAP programs, and we have them online and in person, and we spend we spend a whole day with young people practicing these practical tools. So we find our assertive voice, and we walk around the room with that confident body language, and actually the transformation from there. And that's really why I sort of found Kidscape, was the fact that I was a volunteer prior, and then saw this transformation from these young people coming in, who from all different parts of the country, not talking to each other at first, and then suddenly by the end of it had made real strong connections and friendships. And we're really proud to say, so in the last year, 98% of those young people that attended one of the ZAP programs felt more able to be assertive. And it's exactly what Tim was saying. It's about bullying is a repeated pattern as well, and when we change that dynamic, and it can be the way we suddenly respond to something by saying no, and what Jen was saying is, we talk about broken record, and no matter how we try and really kind of pull that kind of aggression out of our young people, or those sort of more passive responses, and we get them to just stay calm and don't even try and worry about responding in a different way. It's just one sentence: no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. To the point where you might have repeated that 30 or 40 times, but it would diffuse that situation in that moment. And sometimes that's enough to then sort of diffuse that situation. And then we always say, seek help. Have that person in school or at home that you feel that you can confident to talk to.
Yeah, that's really useful. We've just had someone in the comments actually just share a bit of their experience. So they said, I was born with a unilateral cleft lip and palate, bullied all through school back in the 70s. I was told to ignore bullies and they'd get bored and stop. They don't, kids are mean. And when I left school and started work, I expected more of the same, but it never happened again as an adult. It did leave me with self-esteem and confidence issues, but it does get better with age and experience. And I agree, like I think when I was younger, I found it a lot more difficult to deal with, but as I sort of psychologists had told me in the past, why don't you try questioning them when they say things? And it was hard to do at first because I did feel so small and like inferior to them. But then, I thought, well, someone was just said something to me as I walked past a bus stop once, and I just said, what did you just say? Even though I knew full well what they just said. And I was with my friend at the time who was really supportive, and it did feel really good to sort of take the power back a little bit, and then they didn't repeat what they said. They just kind of moved on after that. So definitely just with experience, it does get better. So yeah. Another question then. Some of my friends sometimes say things that hurt my feelings when they think they're just being funny and that it's just banter. How can I explain to them that I want them to stop without making a big scene? I actually have had experience with this quite recently. Me and my friends were just like, well, a few years ago, we were just like taking pictures or something, and I just sort of felt a little bit insecure with some of the pictures that were being taken, and they were sort of joking about it, thinking it was funny. And I, like, don't get me wrong, I have the most supportive friends and I couldn't be more grateful for that, but I don't think they quite realized at the time that it was a bit upsetting for me. And I was a bit worried about making it into like a big thing because it wasn't a massive deal, but it was making me feel a bit uncomfortable. So in the end, I just sort of, like, the next day took one of my friends to the side and was just a bit like, what we were doing the other day, I kind of felt a bit upset about it. And just talking to one of them just one-on-one did feel a bit easier. And because I have such great friends, they were really understanding of it. It's just they weren't aware at the time that it was actually making me feel uncomfortable. So I think just, saying, I'm not trying to make a big deal about it, but I do just want to make you aware that I did feel like that. And then the next day we spoke to my other friend about it and they were really understanding. And I think they just didn't understand at the time that that's how I felt. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has got anything to say about that, talking to friends about it or anything.
Well, that sounds like it worked really well, Bronwyn. It sounds like you did all the right things. I think that was the kind of things I was thinking of in terms of, I guess, banter is, we were talking about this earlier, actually, Jen and I, about banter is one of those difficult ones because it can be a bit of a culture and banter can be quite important in some friendship groups, but actually it can change into something different quite easily. And I think if you're noticing that you're in a group of friends and you feel like that banter is actually causing you more distress, or it's repeated, or it's kind of used in an uneven way, in a kind of sort of a power imbalance way, and it's affecting you after that conversation or making you feel worse, then I think taking that active action, as you said, Bronwyn, and kind of, I think that's a really good tactic of maybe taking the friend that you trust the most and sort of having a one-to-one discussion about it, and just being able to talk about your feelings. I think we sometimes talk about using I language, so it's kind of, you don't want to necessarily feel like you're accusing someone of something, so you can sort of say, I'm just finding it really hard when you make that comment, that's actually upsetting me, I think it's a little bit too far for me. And most of the time, especially if they are your friends, most of the time they should hear that and hopefully put it into action. But that was a really nice example.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the same, in that basically I would be thinking, if your friends don't respond in a way that to go, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, then you might want to question how much you want to be friends with them. If they continue to do it and you rate after you've raised it, I know that's a difficult thing to have to ask yourself, but then I would wonder, how much are they, is this what I want from a friendship? If I raise that and be honest and say, actually, that I didn't really find that funny, and they don't stop, then yeah, I would maybe be thinking, do I want to continue this friendship, which is a whole other topic, but
Yeah.
something else to think about.
So the next question is, bullying has left me feeling so unconfident about myself, and I don't like socializing and get anxious about going to school. Is there anything I can do to get my confidence back? I think a thing that really helped me when I was sort of struggling through that kind of thing was I felt a lot more confident when I realized it wasn't just me that was going through it. Because I think if there's, you're experiencing a lot of bullying, and there's, I didn't really know many people at all with a cleft at the time, and I just kind of felt like it was just me, and I felt really kind of inferior to everyone. But then when I realized that actually a lot of people get bullied for lots of different reasons, and eventually, like through doing things with cleft, I met other people with a cleft who'd had similar experiences and things. Just knowing there was that community of people there that were experiencing a similar thing just kind of made me feel a bit stronger, I guess. So reaching out to other people really did sort of help my confidence, I think.
Yeah, I think bullying, it's really normal for it to knock your confidence, because it can be so horrible, and it can feel so personal. I guess I was thinking about one of the earlier questions we had about kind of why do people bully, and often I would say, most of the time people are bullying, it's something to do with them rather than the person that's being bullied. And if you can try and kind of think about that and actually think, this isn't about me as a person, this is about the other person here, and even kind of just taking a bit of time to write down some of those things, some of those strengths that you have, some of those qualities that you have, and maybe even writing them down. Because I think when bullying gets, whenever bullying is, it's always bad, but especially when it gets bad, you can actually forget those good things and those strengths that you have, because it takes up so much of our headspace. So I think if there's an exercise you can do where you can write down those things, maybe talk to people you trust, whether that's family or friends, and kind of asking, what is it that you like about me? Because there will be qualities that you have that you're forgetting because of the bullying. I think it does make us feel less strong. And equally, when it's really normal to start kind of avoiding things when we feel anxious, that's a totally normal response. But I think sometimes when that happens, we then start missing out on those positive reinforcements of the when you made your friend laugh, and those kind of things that strengthen those relationships and remind us about who we are, and yeah, the positive things that we've got going on.
You're muted, Bronwyn.
I think we'll move on from the children and young people's bit for now. But Mel, do you want to talk about the adults questions?
Yeah, so we've had a few questions asked by adults. So the first one is, what support is available for an adult born with a cleft whose experiences of bullying, either current or historical, such as during childhood, are having an impact on their quality of life now? So I don't know if perhaps Tim or Jen would like to answer this one.
I mean, yeah, we provided a lot of support for adults now. I mean, and every cleft team should have psychology. So every person born with a cleft should have access to a psychologist through their cleft service. And that's, nationally agreed that there are psychologists embedded in cleft services, and that we do support adults as well as young people. So absolutely, it's not an uncommon thing for us to have referrals for. Actually, it's more and more common to get referrals from adults wishing to talk about their cleft and their kind of earlier experiences of that, and how that's shaped and impacted them over the years. It's actually something we do as a service. It's our standard pathway that we speak to every person that's coming into the back to the team as a returning adult or as a new adult. So the first contact they have is with psychologists. So we do a sort of a telephone call before they even have the whole team appointment, just to give them a little bit more information about psychology, understand what their kind of hopes and priorities are for the appointment, to set the scene, set the expectations for who they're going to meet when they're coming in, and explain what psychology is and to see whether they would like some support talking about it. And yeah, I think we've had some people that really have benefited from that and really have taken that offer. And it's not uncommon for people to have ever really even been asked whether this is something that they want to talk about, and if this has affected them. So it's something that we definitely provide in our team, and everybody should, every adult woman with a cleft that's under a cleft team should be able to get support. And I mean, it's a bit more tricky if you're not necessarily under a cleft team for anything else, but we do accept referrals for people who just want to access psychology. That is possible. So it's certainly worth investigating that as a possibility. I would obviously say places like Clapper are also amazing sources of support, and have a lot of different ways to access support as an adult. And places like Changing Faces are quite good as well to go to for counselling. I've talked with adults about getting support there. I know they have a good counselling service. And also, consider talking to your GP as well if the experiences that you've had are really impacting on your mood. It's not uncommon to experience anxiety, low mood as an adult because of those things, and maybe other things as well. It might be a mixture. So consider talking to the GP about what local kind of other psychological services that you can be referred to, and they'll be able to give you options.
Okay, thank you, Jen. That was really useful. We have one more question from adults. So I have started getting some hurtful comments from one of my work colleagues. I've asked them to stop, but still feel that they are disrespecting me and making me lose confidence in speaking out at meetings. Is there anything else I can do to put an end to the bullying?
I could maybe shed some light from a business perspective. My advice to most people is, first point would be speak to the colleague, see if you can get a resolution directly with talking to them, saying how uncomfortable their comments are making you feel. If you get nowhere from that, your company should have, with either in their company policies or their employee handbook, a set of guidelines that will tell you what their anti-bullying policy is, fair treatment process. Contact your HR department, they can go through that with you, give you the advice that you really need, and hopefully that they can sort of support you, and between you and the colleague that are causing the conflict as such, help come to a sort of reasonable conclusion, hopefully. I'm not sure if Tim or Ashley or Jen have got anything else that maybe might be useful to add to those.
I was just going to add, if you felt that you'd sort of exhausted those avenues, then there should be sort of pathways there that you can look at whistleblowing policy as well, and escalating that concern beyond that organisation or that company. But yeah, absolutely. I'd like to highlighted that first post there that they've spoken to that colleague as well, and I think this is sometimes a sort of cloudy area in businesses, and this is why we talk about creating a culture of care and kindness within that work environment, because we need to be able to say, actually, this is making me feel uncomfortable, and Tim, going back to that, the sort of I language, that's something that I really sort of promote as well, as saying this is how I feel, or I'm not comfortable with this, but there isn't then that sort of that in between, I don't think we then have to kind of sort of go down the grievance route. And so it's kind of, yeah, so it's about, yeah, open conversation, and then yeah, looking, if it doesn't resolve there, go beyond. And that should be signposted in those yeah, those sort of company policies as well.
You're muted again, Nadine.
I know, I've just realised. We've just had a question come through online. My daughter will be born in April, and I'm a member of several cleft lip and palate support groups to try and understand what can I do as a dad to instill confidence in my daughter growing up, or to help her with bullying. My advice from a parent's perspective is just give her lots of support, instill in her that despite her differences, there's nothing that she can't do. Basically, the world's her oyster. My daughter's 13, has plans to she wants to join the RAF as a pilot, so don't let the thought of a cleft stop you from telling her that she can or can't do anything. It's not going to be an easy journey, but it's not an impossible journey. And just keep reiterating the positives of everything that she achieves, she's capable of. And I'm sure everybody on here will probably sort of agree that you know, there's plenty of support from CLAPA, your local cleft services that will help support you throughout your cleft journey from day one, really. Not sure if anybody wants to add anything to that.
We've just had a couple of comments come through in the chat. So my son is 9 and he was born with a bilateral cleft lip. He's had a really positive experience at primary school. I just worry about high school though. I think that's a very valid worry, because it is going to be a big sort of change. And I know that it was a worry for me as well when I moved from primary to secondary school, because I guess I'd been with the same people for so long. And then all of a sudden I was going to be in all these new classes, all these new people, bigger environment. You know, it's a big change anyway, isn't it, going to secondary school, let alone with the worry of having a cleft as well. So I think it's a valid worry, but I think it's just, I'd say from personal experience, just take each like day as it comes, and just deal with things as they come as well. And because you never know, he may also have a positive experience at high school as well. And you know, if unfortunately that doesn't happen, then just reach out to the support that is there, I'd say. There's been another comment as well. Others still point and laugh, especially young children, whilst their parents, with their parents, and their parents laugh too, which I find disgusting in this day and age, because everybody's different. Anyone got anything to add to that, or?
I think unfortunately it's one of those where you're never going to be able to preempt somebody's response to you or how you look. But I think it's how you have taught your children to react and hold their heads up high and try and maintain their self-respect and know that they are just as good as anybody else, and you know, they can achieve whatever they want to, and just everybody's different no matter what the is, whether it's physical, mental. Life's a journey, and it's going to have bumps in it, but it's how you deal with it that matters, really, I think.
Yeah. So one more comment. Had bullying throughout my school life, but adulthood is so much easier. People take you for who you are, not your looks, and life does get so much easier. So hang on in there. I agree.
Yeah, so we've got one more comment. It is, I would like to praise the current cleft teams, came back to treatment as the cleft team after 30 years. Wonderful Sapper, Adam Brooks, when I was younger, no support. Take all support given, fantastic support available now for cleft family. So that was one more comment we just had.
Lovely, thank you. So we've just reached 8:30, so that's sort of all we've got time for, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you so much for everything. Just a few sort of closing avenues of support that we wanted to share with you. So I think Bronwyn, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so Clapper have a Children and Young People's Council for those aged 12 to 17 born with a cleft. And it's a great support network for young people, a wonderful opportunity to help make a difference in how Clapper supports the community. But also it's a good place for young people to meet others with a cleft and discuss about similar experiences and things. And you can find more information about this on Clapper's website. Clapper also have a peer and parent support service where you can be paired with another person who is in a similar situation to get advice and support. And we have a student counsellor supporting in this service as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to say thank you as well to everyone who's joined us online. So this video will be available on Clapper's Facebook page straight away, and we will soon upload this to our Clapper YouTube channel as well.
We hope that you found the question and answer session useful, and we'll see you again on one of our upcoming online events in the future.